today what we're going to be doing is taking a look at how to draw birds. And the thing that's interesting for me about this workshop is that for years and years I have been teaching the same basic approach to drawing birds. Is anybody familiar with this book? All right, so this is a book, Drawing Birds, and in this I put my kind of, at that point, step-by-step approach to how do you draw birds. And then what happened is, over time, since this came out, my approach to drawing birds has changed. And I suddenly realized that I was teaching these classes now on, here's how you draw birds. But when I was going out to draw birds, I had my own little secret. And I was doing something that was different than what I was showing people. So the entire book is not out of date, but there's a little section at the start that sort of shows one of the most important parts of drawing birds, which is kind of getting your basic fundamental lines down on paper. And my approach to doing that has changed since the time this book came out. And so if you have taken my bird drawing workshops before, you'll probably be actually at a disadvantage here, because you then have to unlearn the previous approach. But I really think this is better. It's going to allow you to get down the fundamental shape that you see much more quickly and much more accurately, and not in some kind of generic bird form, but the specific angles and details of whatever bird happens to be perched in front of you. And what we're going to be working on here isn't the details of how you draw the feathers around the eyes and the details on the wings. That's a subject for another workshop. In this one, we're going to be looking at the even more basic, even more fundamental idea of the bird pops in front of you. How do you quickly get that form down on the paper? If you started a drawing and there was a silhouette of the bird already done for you, it would be a lot easier to do, right? Each one of these birds, this is the inside cover of the old Peterson Field Guide to Drawing Birds. What's neat is you can identify every one of these birds here just based on the shape of its body. So the shape is that important. What angle does it typically sit? How big is its head relative to its body? What are the angles that connect that body and the head? That carves the bird. And you can go by each one of these and have sort of a fun birder game. You try to figure out who they are just by looking at the silhouettes without looking at the cheat sheet over there. And you can do it. So the shape is that important. But everybody gets really focused early on about how do you draw the eye and all those details in there. If you're doing that on top of a framework that has the basic shape, your bird's going to look like the bird. But no matter how many chickadee details you put in, if you're putting it on a pheasant body form, something's going to look a little bit off. Right? And even in some of these sort of smaller birds here, there are important but subtle differences. How do you get those really fast so you've got this framework to be able to fill in all your details? So subsequent class will look at a lot more of the details, like how do you draw feet, how do you draw wings. But in this one, let's get the basic form quickly on paper. The plan is, I'm going to first show you what my old approach was for people who had learned that before, and I'll show you why I don't think that is the best way to do it anymore. Then I'm going to show you how I am now doing it, and then you're going to have a chance to play with that and experiment with it and see how that works for you. Sort of real time with fast sketches of birds. Can you get the feeling for that bird down on the paper with just a few strokes? And then I'm going to show you a little bit about filling some of the details of that bird in. And at the very end, I'm going to show you one last little trick that will dramatically improve any bird you want to draw. So it's one little kind of subtle little trick, makes a big difference on having any of those birds look right back at you. All right? So here we go. Let's take a look at the way that I used to approach it. The first thing I did in the past was I would look at the general angle that a bird is sitting, and I call this its posture. And what I imagined was a line kind of through the central axis of that bird. And that I would then build up the whole drawing of that bird around that line, and the bird would have that right posture. So that a little bit larger, I would see my bird and I would draw lightly on my piece of paper a posture line, and then as if you were sticking a little a hot dog and sticking it on a stick, I would put the body right along that line. So that's the posture of its body. Give it a head. And then I would put in what's called the eye-beak line, and that's a line that goes underneath its eye and the beak. That ends up being a really useful line. The beak lines up with the bird's eye. That bird's eye sits right on top of that line. Let's move that eye back just a little bit. So the eye sits right on top of that line. If you want, let's pull up one more chair for you here. Let's see if we can get out another chair. There's also room on the floor if you would like. Welcome. So that eye-beak line was a very useful line. I still use that, you'll see, but that would kind of happen early in my drawing. Then part of the problem with this approach is people would start with this. This was my original approach, and then draw the details of the bird on top of this. A couple of problems. One was the snowman bird. And what the snowman bird is because you started your drawing with these two circles, people would then kind of follow along these two circles in a sort of snap to grid way. And you would get these drawings of birds that would look like somebody took two circles and put them together because somebody took two circles and put them together. So that was just what you did. So you get these very kind of snowman birds. So to help people kind of fight the snowman, what I would then do is talk to people about, you have to now cut in the angles. And we would look at how there are these angles around these places. And I would sort of carve into that with some straight lines. And that would help fight against the snowman bird. But still those snowman birds would pop up on a regular basis. On top of this, you can add just sort of a suggestion of where the wing goes, where the feet go. This would be what I would lightly draw in my journal as the framework for my bird. And this is done either very lightly with a pen or a graphite pencil. Very, very lightly. Another thing that I would do is use a non-photo blue pencil. All right, so this is the erasable non-photo blue pencil. That's the one right there. Not any pencil, not any non-photo blue pencil, but specifically this is the Prismacolor Kohl Erase 20028 Copy Not NF Blue. That's what it will say on the side of the pencil. That's the pencil that you want. And it makes a mark that is much lighter, much more ghostier than any of the other brands of non-photo blue pencils. Could I just take a look at the those two pencils which we had here?
This one's not quite what we want either, but
right.
I can find it.
So could I use yours again? Right. So I'm just going to do a quick demo here. And over here I'm going to make 3 little blotches. These are all non-photo blue pencils. They're not the same. The one that I like makes a very, very faint... Oops, this isn't the one that I like. Right? Can you see that little dark mark? Right? I'm going to use the same pressure with this other non-photo blue pencil. Right? And you see both of those very, very clearly. Now here's the one that I like. This is the one that will just make marks that are light enough that you can see them when they're right up here in front of your face. And once you start to draw over them with graphite, people will just completely ignore that they're there because it's such a ghosty mark. So this is the same pressure with this pencil. Right? So just because it's a non-photo blue pencil doesn't mean that this is the one we're talking about. So that's the bad boy that you want. I wouldn't recommend trying to make a... I would not advise trying to make your sky blue with that color because it's just too ghosty. But for these sorts of purposes, it's great. And then you just draw over the top of that, and you've already worked out where your head is and how big it is and where your feet are and the general proportions of this thing. You can now focus on detail, and it's a lot easier. So the drawing comes in 2 phases. Phase 1, you get that basic shape with your non-photo blue pencil. Phase 2, you then draw in your details crisply and slowly and deliberately on top of that. The way you draw, as you'll see soon, in both of these 2 modes is very, very different. the way you make your marks, the speed at which you draw, the sorts of things that you're going to be noticing. They're very different. One other problem with this original approach that I had was that if you're starting with a line with a little sausage on it, and people then go to put in the head, naturally what people would do is go like, okay, we took the body and we stuck it on this little hot dog skewer, so now let's take the little marshmallow of the head and put it boop, right on there too. And so people would get what I call the hot dog bird, which is this bird with this real kind of leany forward posture. And this bird is going to have to use a lot of muscles to hold its head out here. And birds tend not to do that. If the bird's head is behind its chest, like this, if its head is back here, it doesn't have to use as much weight. It does muscles to kind of keep it back here. So this ends up being a much more kind of characteristic posture, instead of that hot dog bird out here. So there were two basic postures. This flat back one, the head up one. And I didn't want to get that hot dog bird. That was another kind of problem with my old system. So I had to do, if you've taken some of my previous bird drawing classes, I talked to people a lot about the wall. I imagined this force field in front of the bird, and like, don't stick your head out there unless the bird is being really active and intentionally foraging on something. At rest, the bird's head is going to be back behind the wall, so people would have to think about that. One last problem with this was that sort of partway through the drawing, remember when we had those two circles, we then were carving in those angles? Those angles are what artists call the negative shapes. Here, looking at what is the shape of the air back here, kind of get that shape. Getting those angles ends up being really important for sticking your head on top of your bird and having it look right. Getting the angles that are right in here and right in here. Right? But if you're drawing fast and you started with the posture and then did the circle and then did that, by this point the bird actually may have already moved and you've lost that critical angle. And so people would have to make it up or not do it at all. And that also was one other disadvantage of the previous system. Let's just take a look at a couple of birds, and what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to put a bird up, and I'm going to ask you not to look at the bird. I'm going to ask you to look at the shape of the blue air next to the bird. Right? You see this straight line right there? That is now how I'm going to start my drawing. And what it's going to do, it's going to get me my posture, and it's also going to get sort of the relative connection between my head and my back. So with one line, instead of thinking of the central axis of the bird, I'm now going right along the back of the bird. You'll often see birds with this posture, or take a look at, again, the air behind the bird here. Here it's taken its head and lifted it up a little bit. Notice that its head is indeed behind the wall, but the negative shape here is now like that. All right? That's my critical angle. And that's how it's going to start. So I'm going to pop a bird up here. I want you to look at the angle along its back. You see that? If you start your drawing with that, that line will inform the rest of the drawing. Same bird, slightly different posture. Right? Do you see that? That's how you start your bird, right? You get that negative shape. And the trick, again, is don't look at the bird. Look at the yellow. When you look at the bird, the blue here, you're too distracted by bird to really see that angle. Look at the yellow and notice how much easier it is to see that shape when there's no distracting bird there. Similarly, the negative shape in the front of the throat is also going to be helpful here. So that negative shape there, that's going to attach our bird to our bird's head to its body. So here is the new approach to how you do this. Here's my lovely assistant, and he's going to help me. Take a look at the negative shape going from the top of its head here down its back. Right? You come down, down, down. Right? what I do is I now focus on what is that shape, and I draw it on my piece of paper. Step 2 is I'm then going to hang a head from that line. So I attach my bird head right onto that line, right there. There's my birdie head. And then I can give myself, remember that little eye beak line, that's still useful. So I'll put in my little eye beak line. So I started with this. My eye beak line. My next line is the negative shape right here on the front of the bird. This negative shape. And it hangs from the front of the head here. So it's going to attach here and it's going to come down. What is that shape? You don't have to follow it all the way. Just getting this top part, this zone in here in the upper chest, what is the angle that that shape is? In some birds it's going to come straight down. In some birds there'll be a little scoop in and then around, almost a little S shape. But that angle is going to be really, really important to get. Now, my head is attached onto my body. I'm going to give my bird the rest of its body. And this is the point in this process where you're thinking about the proportions. How big is this bird's head compared to its body? So this bird's head is about, roughly you can fit 2 of its heads in its body. And so in this space here, I am going to put a little oval that size. One mistake that I've seen that some people will do with this, let's say they've got this for their start here, and here they're starting off. If they drew this line really long, what people will tend to do is when they draw in their body oval, they'll say like, oh, I've got to make it as long as whatever line I made here. This line's job is not to get your body proportions. This line's job is to get the angle of the back. And it wasn't thinking about how long it had to be. So if you put this in like that to follow the length of that line, you'll get the crazy hot dog bird, right? So we don't want that. So just look at, relative to this head, how big is my body? That's the point where you're looking at some proportions. My tail is going to come somewhere into this. The tail is going to hinge from a point somewhere in there in the body, and that could be, it could be here, it could be up like this. Wrens like to pop their tail up really high. So that tail is going to pivot from a point somewhere in there. You want to get what direction your tail is coming in. Here's a couple of other angles that are very useful. Let me erase some of this. Here. So a couple of other angles that are very useful are the forehead angle here. Some birds have a very steep forehead. Some, like a meadowlark, will have a very flat forehead. So what is the angle in here of that forehead? And I also think of a little cone here attaching my, at the base of my tail. There's a pad of feathers on the top of it, a pad of feathers on the bottom. That often makes a very interesting angle right there where what's called the undertail coverts meet the lower belly feathers. For the wing, I'm drawing along the bottom edge, a line along the bottom edge of that wing. And it can start here, it can start here, it can start actually a lot of places up here and still be anatomically accurate. What this point is actually the bird's wing is its hand folded up like this, and as it nestles into the feathers, it could have it here, it could have it back here, so it actually could start here and come back like that and still be anatomically accurate. That bird would just have its wrist down like that. This one has it about a third of the way from the top, 2/3 from the bottom. So roughly somewhere in here starting, And then this one, its tail, it goes out right above the tail. So you do have some wiggle room where you start that point. And we'll have a subsequent class where we'll go into more detail about the legs. The legs come out, though, at a forward angle. Or sometimes you see a little bit of a sock coming down, and then the leg comes out from that. This is an example with a bird with an angle behind the back of its head. All the details go on top of a little sketch that handles that basic shape. This is the part then that everybody's excited about. They say, I want to do this, right? But if you do this without first doing this, it's like writing a term paper without having written an outline at the start. You'll have sentences and stuff that are good, but they're not necessarily going to be in the right place. And other things you're like, oh, I wanted to say more about that in there. I wish I thought of that earlier. And if you can't like put it on a computer and cut it and paste it, that's a real nuisance. So that's why we write an outline before we cut and paste, but before we write our paper. This is the same way. I give myself this little diagram on top of which all my details can go. And again, in a subsequent class, we'll go in deep on those details. A little bit in this class, but we'll go much deeper in the future. Let's take a look at what happens if we do the same approach, but this time with a bird where it is a flat slope all the way across the back. Take a look at that angle. And it is very often when you say kind of look at that angle and copy that angle down, that can actually be a more difficult thing to do than you might think. One good way to think about kind of capturing an angle is just sort of imagine a 45-degree angle and say to yourself, is this greater than or less than that 45-degree angle? Right? So imagine that line, right, in a graph. And if you can kind of just generally get yourself, oh, this is greater than a 45-degree angle, even if it's not exactly on where you got it, you're better off. So initially you might think about your angles, is this, more than a 40, less than a 45, is it more than a 45? To get that back angle of your bird. So I'll look at that angle and draw that on my piece of paper. Then it's going to be the same thing. The angle on the back, and the head hangs down from that. There's this angle then in the front of the throat. What do I see there? Oh, sorry. There's my beak. My beak line. And then that angle in the front of the throat. And then you're looking at how big is that body relative to that head. Then you're going to put your tail, your wings, your legs into that. Notice on this bird also, this is kind of cool, its wing is starting closer to the bottom than the top. All right, so remember we said that wing could start anywhere in here and still be anatomically accurate. So we're seeing that. So I notice, where does my wing start? Oh, I'm not doing it yet. Here's my forehead angle, that undertail covert angle, and now I bet we'll put in the wings. There they are. And the legs. So that's my basic framework. And then I can draw details on that. But if I start the details without getting that basic framework down, it's going to be a lot more difficult for me. Let's think about the temperature in this room. Are people starting to fry?
Yeah.
All right. Are we going to blow you sideways if we turn that back on again?
Yeah.
All right, so maybe push one of those buttons and I'll let you be the fan monitor there. Just not the white button, one of the other buttons. And we'll try to kind of keep that temperature down here so we don't we don't bake. If I speak this loud, can I still be heard clearly in the back, even if you're next to the fan?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So for friends at home, it's hot in here. All right. So, there's my birdie. Let's take a look at this with some real birds and just get a little bit of practice seeing these negative shapes. If you can get yourself to the point where a bird pops up to you and you look at it and you go like, whoa, what a great negative shape. You are way ahead of the curve. If that gets too blowy for you, you can push it back a few notches.
Yeah, thank
There's
you.
several layers, right? So, take a look at this one. See that shape on the back? But I would consider this one to be one of the ones that is more straight along the back. So I wouldn't even be worried about this little kind of nugget in there. I just kind of go like straight angle at the back. Here's your head. There you go. Train your brain. It wants to look at the eye. Train your brain to look at the shape of the air behind it. See that? See the shape of the air. Notice when can you hold your hand up at that angle? Or take your pencil, just put your pencil along its back there. Right, that's the angle that you then are going to be copying down to your piece of paper. That's the angle there that you're putting down on your piece of paper. That's the angle there. For proportions are how big is the head relative to the body. This bird looks cute. The reason this bird looks cute is because it has a big old head. Cuteness is a physiological response to proportions. If something has a big head, we want to snuggle with it and take care of it, right? And like that little one right there, all right? Big head, you got to check out ridiculously cute baby right over there. But like wash your hands before you get near the babies, all right? So what you do is you think about like if you got a head this big, let's look how big your body is, right? You're basically two heads. Maybe the body's a little bit bigger than that. But if you made this body this big, it would not be cute. All right, so you can do the cute test for your birds and see how cute does this bird look. And does mine look too cute or not too cute enough? That's a proportion thing. All right? Take a look at this one here. How big is that head relative to the body? By the way, not cute, right? Big body, not cute. Big body, not cute. Sorry. But look, can you get your brain to snap to that angle? Now, look at the negative shape in the front of the bird. And notice that when you look at that shape, that what we often tend to do is our brain says, oh, it's a curve in the front of the bird. What happens if you start drawing a curve is your brain kind of knows what a curve should look like, and it will take over. And what you're going to lose is the fact that this isn't a continuous curve. This is straight down to here, and then there's an inflection point right there. Notice how those two straight lines actually capture that shape very effectively. If when I'm carving in the shape of this, I do it a little bit more angularly at the start as I'm kind of blocking it in, I will be able to capture these sorts of inflection points. This head, you'd want to go, oh, it's got a rounded head. Oh yeah? Well, wouldn't it be better if you thought of that head like that? Because then you'll get those two inflection points instead of making a dome. But let me erase those lines and you'll see again just how tempting it would be to just make a dome. So at this point, if you can angularize a curve, do so. This is still your kind of light, sketchy drawings. Go for an overly angularized chickadee.
Very cute.
Right? Very cute, big head, right? And you'd want to just go like, oh, it's got an S curve on its front. When you start making your S, one thing that happens is people then tend to make too much of an S. And then what happens is you get these birds with really skinny necks. Too S-y. Less S-y, right? But also thinking of this as some angles. you will be better able to capture those inflection points on whatever bird you're looking at. See how easy it would be on the throat of this to draw an S that was like that? Because you see a little bit of an S, and then your brain wants to do big S. Right? Just without drawing the bird on your piece of paper, draw this curve 3 times. And you at home, do the same thing. Just get out a little piece of paper, draw that curve 3 times. Don't think about it as part of a bird. Think of it, oh, there's a shape. I'm going to copy that shape. So, nice negative shape here too. Look at that. Boom. Boom. So the drill, once again, is that angle on the back, put in your head, put in the upper chest, put in your body, and then for the other parts, the tails, the feet, where the wing goes, somewhere in here, to above. It's got a forehead angle here. That really helps you quickly block in the bird. What I like about this new approach is that it gets me looking at these negative shapes right at the start. And those can be really furtive, and they're really important to getting this bird to look like the bird that you're looking at. Still, proportions are important. Proportions come in at the point that you are drawing in that body oval. You've already got your head, you're going to make a body oval relatively sized to it. So that being said, what I'm going to do is go back to this bird, and what I'd like you to do is on your piece of paper, let's make a lightning sketch of this. Light, loose, fast. Don't slow down and get into details of beaks and eyes and feet. See if you can quickly kind of carve out the fundamental lines of this bird. And also notice how tempting it is on something like this to do this with that body. Really draw that body oval in instead of something like that as something like that. If you get a body oval that's too long, you don't have to erase, just draw over it again.
Is there a rule of thumb to connect the head and the body so you don't end up with that snowman?
So in this, we're just looking initially at the negative shapes here and the negative shape here. The rule of thumb is that these shapes are going to guide how to attach that on. Typically in the back, you'll either see a shape like this or a shape like this. It's flat across the back or angled up. In the front, you'll typically see it straight down, or sometimes at an angle, or sometimes there's a little shelf. It comes down here and then out where the chest starts and then down. So you often will sometimes see this sort of a thing in the front, this little step. Matter of fact, this one might have a little step. Let me erase all these little lines. There's a micro step there.
That's good.
Let's try it with this one. Well, oh, actually, I better stop. I'm looking around. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm saying. I'm seeing people like, okay, I'm going to draw this lightly, loosely, quickly. That speed of drawing is what you're doing at the end of a drawing. At the start, your eye is moving lightly, loosely, dancing around the whole subject. It's not getting locked in any one place. Your hand is moving quickly over the entire thing, trying to, as quickly as possible, get the oomph of that thing down. So the motion is much more like this. All right, here's my bird. It's kind of got draw multiple lines, lots of lines, and right? So lots of lines. If you make lots of lines, lightly, loosely, and quickly, then your brain will be moving all over it. It's a different way of seeing, a different way of thinking. You're taking in the whole thing, and you're trying to get that quickly down on paper. So, to practice this, this is going to be the bloodless rodeo, right? And the way that that works is, it's going to be speed drawing, and if you've ever been to a rodeo, the calf goes running out there, cowgirl jumps down, ropes the calf, and ties up its legs, and when she's done, she goes, woo! All right? So hands up, show the judges you're done, and the clock stops, right? So with this, it's going to be the bird drawing rodeo, and what I want you to do is, everybody give me a woo. Everybody give me a woo! Right, no, hands up, ready? Woo! All right, so what you're going to do is you are going to quickly, bum, 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 bum. Whoever is the first, woo, you win. All right? And even if the person next to you, they're being a little bit more careful, they can maybe got that shape a little bit more fine, you got there first. Right? So, on your mark. All right? Get set. Actually, before you start, we're going to let the calf out of the pen a little bit ahead of you, so you get a chance to look at it, and when I say go, your horse is off and you try to rope it. On your mark. So look at it, look at it, look at it, feel it, that's your angle, there's your head, there's that other angle, feel it, look at that little step, ooh, okay, I can handle that, and go! Give me a good woo when you're done.
Which part are we stopping at?
How do you know you're done?
You've got that basic sketch, that whole basic sketch in.
Oh.
Bless you. First whoop. That was a rather weak whoop though.
This was a sneeze.
Give me another whoop. Woo! Woo! Well, you guys gotta practice your whoop. Give me some better whoops. There we go. All right, so we're gonna try this again. Now again, your goal is light, loose, fast. You're going to get something down on your paper. Now, here's the thing. You think, but what, you know, it doesn't do me any good just to get something down if it's going to be the wrong shape. Au contraire, right? The deal is you get something down on paper. You then look at it. You now have something you can compare with reality. Do not assume that your lines are going to be in the right place. After you whooped, it is then cool and actually encouraged and good to go back in there and refine just a few of the elements of what you have. All right? So you're going to give me a whoop, right? And then once you've whooped, you've already won, right? Go back in there and then kind of go and assume that there will be some things like, actually the angle of the back should be more like that. Actually, I bought this too much in here, I'm going to make it more like that, okay? So just tweak a couple of things. Make at least 2 tweaks after your whoop. 2 tweaks post-whoop on your mark. So first you get to look at it, all right? So it gets to run around a little bit. There, sort of feel that angle. Look at that. Where's the inflection point? Interesting. And go. Okay, first whoop. Second whoop, whoop. Okay, we gotta go for faster whoops. This part of the drawing is not slow. You're thinking like, but you're rushing me, but you're rushing me. Yes, I am. The bird's gonna move, right?
Yeah.
So this is intentionally fast. And if we have a tendency to want to go slow because I want to get it right. No, just get yourself to just jet something down on the paper and then modify it. But jet it down lightly, because if you press hard when you're zooping it down there, then your brain will go, look, there's a very bold definitive line here, it must be in the right place. Right? So try to get it down quickly, whoop, and modify. Right? Who's going to have the fastest whoop on this next one? Right, so you're the fastest one on that last one, right? So that cowboy there, that's the one to beat. All right? Are you ready? First, look at it. All right? There's the angle on the back. There's the head, eye beak line. There's that angle. Proportions, tail, line. Where do the legs come out? Whoop. And go. Good, good. That's the kind of timing that we want. Right? That's the kind of, good. Second whoop up. Cowgirl up. Good, good. Still some rather weak whoops. You should have heard them down in Saratoga. In Saratoga, they can whoop. Alright, so on this next one, we got to show the Saratogans how you whoop. How you whoop up here in Cupertino. Are you ready? Now, on this next one,
Only they sit still that long.
yeah. So we'll talk about the moving bird in a minute, right? But so for this next one will be a cute bird. So what I want you to do is when you get to the proportions part of it, when you're drawing in that second circle, just kind of pause for a second, kind of notice, okay, it's cute. It's cute. That means it's going to be a surprisingly small body, right? And just kind of look at like, oh wow, you really do have a small little body, you sweet little thing. All right? And drop that in. Are you ready? So first look at it. Give me a good, loud, everybody give me your best whoop right now. Okay, now that's what we're talking about. All right, and first look at it, feel the bird, feel the bird. Aww, snugums, right? Straight to an inflection point there. Just look at that, all the way down there, at that angle. Oh, interesting. On your mark, get them set, and go. Nice. It's probably having the fan behind you that gives you some extra fluff in your sail. Good. Now once you whoop, go back and see if you can tweak at least two things. Assume that there will be things to tweak. If you don't see anything that you can tweak, you're probably not looking hard enough. Right? But do notice that your brain will tend to say that the lines I have on my paper, especially if they're drawn with distinction and gusto and force, they are 100% right and don't need any tweaking. But if you had gone more lightly with those same lines, your brain would say, actually dude, I would change that over there. I would change that there. Did anybody find something to tweak?
Oh yeah.
Good. Give yourself permission to tweak. So get it down, whoop and tweak. All of these have had flat backs. We're now going to add another thing into the mix. Some of these birds are going to start to do this with their head. So on the back, you're going to see an angle. So that initial line isn't just going to be a straight line. It's going to be, there's going to be a little kink in it, right? So now, feel, don't draw yet, feel that line, right? Inflection point there. Look at this in the front. Down here to an inflection point there. It's pretty much a straight line all the way down to there. But notice when I move my hand away, it feels like the whole thing's a curve. Right? Isn't that interesting? And those inflection points. All right? Feel this bird, feel the bird, feel the bird. All right? Cowgirl back there was the fastest one on this last one. You're the cowgirl to beat. And go. Light, loose. Relax your shoulders, breathe. Good, good, good. Nice. That also will make the video a lot more fun for the people who are listening to it, kind of hearing your whoops in there. So you guys got to make it loud enough for them to hear on the projector. Good. Now, this next one, all I'm interested in is flat out speed. Right? As a matter of fact, you're not even have time to look down at your paper. You're going to be looking up at the bird, going as fast as you can, drawing the bird on your piece of paper without peeking. All right? And what you want to do, everybody kind of draw in the air with the speed that your pencil's been moving. Now double that. That's what I want. I want that, right? They're just frenetic, like Bugs Bunny, like Tasmanian Devil style, right? All right, so, and just that hand is going fast, but try to have your hand responding to things that you're actually seeing, right? You want to have a connection between the motion that your hand is doing and the angle that you're seeing on the screen. So don't start yet, but just feel it, feel what you're about to do, feel what you're about to do, and go. Oh, I already saw you peek. Good, now do it again. Do it again. This time you can look, but keep it fast. This time you can look, but keep it fast. Did you make the S curve on its neck too big, giving it a teeny neck? Did you make its body too big? You ready? Good, good, well done. All right, so that's what we want. It's a totally different part of drawing. This initial part of drawing, it's fast, it's loose, it's light. It's fast, it's loose, it's light. If you go slow, your brain will be locking in on details. If you go tight, you're not going to be able to give your brain the flexibility to kind of move around over the shape. If you go heavy, you're going to be convinced that all your lines are in the right places, and you will not be willing to modify them. Right? So this next one, I want everybody to breathe. Drop your shoulders, shake out your hand. All right? Now, what I want you to do is just sort of, in a relaxed state, you're going to be drawing this next one. Really try to feel the connection between what your eye sees and what your hand does. All right, so there's an angle here, you're feeling that in the air. As a matter of fact, before we do this, we're going to play Pat the Bird. All right, what I'd like you to do is just imagine that this was a three-dimensional thing in front of you and put your hand along its tummy. Feel that curve along the tummy. Feel that. Now feel that angle on the back. Pat the bird. All right, feel that on the other side. All right, you can physically feel this with your hands. All right? As you're drawing now, it's going to be as if the form of this bird is already on your page and you're just sort of moving your lines around it. You're going to be physically feeling the bird as you're making your strokes. It's patting the bird. All right? Give it a try. Pat the bird.
Go.
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 Pat the bird with your pencil.
tweak, 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 tweak.
Tweak, yeah, and then tweak. So it's good. So one reason why the whoop is actually useful is you're tricking your brain it's time to tweak, and it's okay to tweak. That's why I want you to whoop, because that tweaking part is actually a really important part of this process. We've already got something down on the paper, not assuming that it's right, and then get your tweak on. Was anybody able to kinesthetically feel the bird as they're making their pencil strokes? It doesn't work for everybody, but for some people will kind of, often I will kind of have this physical response. It's as if I've got this bird on my paper here and I'm carving around it, right? Pat this bird in the air, pat this bird. Feel that angle on the top, feel that angle on its belly. Feel that bird. Right? And so, yeah, you folks at home do this too. You're there, we're looking at your computer, and I want you there like doing this sort of stuff along with the bird. Feel that bird. Nobody's looking. Everybody else in this room is doing it too. It's okay. Right? Feel that. Now what you're going to do is you're going to transfer that to paper. This shape, that head, you're going to hang this curve, those angles from the front, this oval here. Stop, check those proportions. Right? Get all the way to whoop, and then tweak. Good, you're all ready to whoop. So now tweak. So now modify. Once you've whooped, give me some good whoops. All right. So once you're at whoop, then get in there and tweak. All right. See, that was the most solid whoop out of this whole thing. It wasn't the first whoop, but that was a stand-up whoop right there. So the San Francisco whoop workshop, they can whoop. Are people sort of seeing what happens when you get intentionally into that tweaking mode? All right, once you kind of get yourself where you've whooped, now I can tweak, and knowing that you can, knowing that is going to be coming, it also helps you sort of realize, I got to make my first lines. Does anybody help you if they made those first lines a little bit lighter? All right, yeah, keep them light, keep them loose. That's how I block out my birds now. That's my process in the field. And I'm finding that for me, I'm getting more accurate birds, more lifelike birds. I'm catching subtleties of poses much better than I was before. And it's fast. It's a faster technique. A lot of the kind of the stages of that previous one are all in here, but they just come more quickly. The one thing I am having a little bit of trouble, and I really have to remind myself to do, is when I'm drawing in that body oval, I'm doing that proportionate to the head. So just when you are putting in that oval for your body, stop. Like, do I like those proportions? No, I can change. All right. Sometimes I'll once I kind of pause at my body oval, even before I put in my tail and my undertail coverts, I'll stop. I'll kind of like, is that no? Okay, now I'm ready to go on from there. So I'll do a little kind of minor tweak right in there, because that's going to be an important thing as well.
I just
Yes.
use that wall that you referred to when I used the Zoom technique. Yeah, and when I look at my examples, I use it in the process of going through, getting the name of the shape of the chest, etc. I consistently use that wall.
You use it?
Lose it.
All right, so she's saying that she is consistently losing the wall. So what might be going on, right, is here's my head. As that line starts to come down, if I'm bringing it too far in here, I'm going to end up with my head really sticking out. So notice that if this is that head, this is coming down all the way out there. Let me just back up a bird or two. This bird here, here's its head, And that is coming down here. So you're hanging that throat off the front of that circle. And then it's going to kind of come down from there. Very often, on this little one here, right, that is coming in at a really steep angle. So this bird's head is really out there, right? But believe this angle. If it is doing this, you will have a head hanging out, right? But look at that. Right? That's coming straight down from underneath there. So if I start following that, my head will automatically be behind the wall, because now I'm going to put my body in there. My head is behind that wall.
I can start drawing that necklace
Mm-hmm.
before I draw the body.
Yes. Yes. So that's absolutely right. So she's saying draw the neckline before the body. So my order of operations are negative shape on the back, head, eye beak line, neckline. And I bring that neckline down a little bit onto the top of the chest, so that's going to help inform how I'm going to draw on my body. So I don't have to draw it all the way down here, just enough to kind of help me catch the front part of my body there.
Say that again.
So order number one, order of operations, is the back, right? Then the head, then the eye beak line, then the front of the chest.
Which includes the neckline?
Yeah, so that's here down to here, to some point in there. So yeah, that sort of throat and the upper breast.
And then the body.
Then you're putting in the body after that. And when you're putting in the body, that's the point where you're. So for getting this to be intuitive, what is going to make the big difference is putting in some reps, some repetitions. So you want to kind of work this so that a bird pops up on you and your brain is on autopilot. And you know exactly what to do. I see my negative shape, I'm jumping in with that, I'm going to grab that, I'm going to get that, I'm going to get that, boom, 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 boom. So your homework, before I show you some bird details, I want to tell everybody your homework. Your homework is, that's the newest, youngest member of the Nature Journal Club. So your homework is to fill up 4 or 5 pages of a nature journal with quick sketches of these birds, just these preliminary parts, just these kind of get down these quick lines. I'm going to recommend that you go to the website birdpixel.com or seeingbirds.com. Birdpixel or Seeing Birds, and just go through a bunch of pictures, pull up a picture of a bird, make a quick sketch. Right, just this to the point where you've got that, sort of what you do with your blue pencil. And then do another one, Don't get kind of lost in the weeds of now I'm going to draw on the foot and all this other sort of stuff. Just give yourself a bunch of repetitions drawing those fundamental basic lines. And something that's fun to do is, let's say this is my page. All right, I'm going to draw my first one here, next one here, next one here, next one here, next one here. Then get out a different color of colored pencil and overlap that one here. Now just ignore those brown ones. And then you can get out another color of colored pencil and do that. And it's really kind of fun. You can have all these birds kind of looking back at you from the page. So fill up a page with them, then turn the page. Fill up another little page. One of these little sketches can be 1 minute, 30 seconds, or 1 minute. All right, so I'm not asking you actually to take a bunch of time. I'm asking you in that time to make a bunch of sketches then. And that's much better than doing one drawing and then kind of getting there, drawing the beak and drawing that part and then drawing that part and then drawing that part. Because what we want to do is we want to drill these initial stages. Yes?
When we're doing our homework, can we like draw just their faces?
So for this, I'm going to suggest you do the whole bird.
Okay.
Yeah, so just a bunch of birds, but do the whole bird so you can kind of get this sort of feeling for how these parts fit together. Sound good?
Yes.
All right. Now, let's take a look at filling in some of the details on these birds. Because, you know what, that actually is fun too. In a subsequent class, we'll go in deep. But here we're just going to take our last half hour, take a look at how to tweak a few of those little details, and also what is that sort of one little trick that will improve all the birds. All right, so we're going to go to, here we go. So there you've got this. Once you're here, what do? Step one, put down your non-photo blue pencil. You don't want to get caught perpetually in non-photo blue pencil land. All right? And, so, okay, good. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
So you don't want to get caught in non-photo blue pencil land. You can start anywhere you want, but what I often do is I will just sort of start here with the face. If you can get this bird kind of looking back at you, the eye, the beak, the face, that region is kind of looking solid, you're going to like your bird. All right? But sometimes if the face really doesn't work, no matter how many other details you work on, it's not going to work for you. So here's one way to start. We'll put a beak on our bird. So here's my bird beak. I'm just going to check here. Yep. And a trick with my bird beak that you might like is instead of drawing a line all the way to the tip of the beak, which can kind of look a little bit cartoony, very often that suture in that mouth is clearly seen towards the back of the beak, but is harder to see out towards the tip. So you can let that line kind of fade out. There's also sometimes a little nostril in the upper part of the beak. The bird's head feathers, they're going to attach not to the bottom of the beak like that, they're going to attach a little bit further out like that, which you'll see. Here's a little eyeball on my bird. The eye is going to be closer to the front of the bird than you think, and it is sitting on the line that goes down the middle of the mouth. But it'll often be closer to the front than you think. That space is going to be smaller than that space unless you're drawing an American woodcock. Look for angles as you come around. Some parts will be rounded. You can round around those corners, but try to keep some of the angles in there. Also notice I'm putting a few little flicks right in here. Those little hatchy marks, those little flick marks in there will kind of make it look a little bit scruffy and fluffy. Similarly, around the rest of the body, these breast feathers up in here are very small with kind of tight ends on them. As you get down on the lower flanks here, they get looser and fluffier. So sometimes I'll kind of just put a few little tick marks, little flick marks in here, rather than a solid line, kind of suggests that texture. The way I make these marks is I take my pencil and I press it down, wiggle it a little bit, and then flick it in. So press, wiggle, flick in, and you'll get a mark that is darker on the outside, bigger on the outside, lighter on the inside, and that suggests kind of the cracks in the feathers rather nicely. At this point, we're going to keep our wings simple. The front part of the wing up here on the top, this is the this part right here, those are the back feathers sitting down on the top of the wing. This corner of the wing gets covered up by a bunch of the breast feathers that cover up this part here. So if you put a few little tick marks in there. For now, we'll keep our wings really simple. In future classes, we'll go deep, 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 deep. into wingland. But for now, one way of thinking about the wings is that instead of just sort of a point like that, it's going to come down. There'll be a little bit of a step where the secondary feathers are, and then a thinner part where the primaries are. So you can often find a little step in your bird wings. And we're seeing that in this guy in here. When we get into wings, I will also show you some details. Often there's a number of rows of smaller feathers right up at the top of the wing, and another day we will really get into detail about those. Those are the places where we make patterns such as wing bars and things like that. On the head of the bird, you're often going to find kind of a light ring of feathers around its eye, or even if it's the same color as the head of the bird, there'll be a slightly different texture there. So sometimes I'll put these little kind of eyebrow and lower marks around the eye. Makes it look a little bit sleepy. Yes, sir?
Do you have any tricks for them to have with the scales? Do you have any tricks for the feathers?
The scales on to draw the feathers? Yes, I do. For drawing you're saying tricks for kind of giving that, often you kind of see a lot of the sort of scaly effect on especially on the wings.
Yeah.
So in a subsequent class, we'll go into some detail on that. In this workshop, we're working at getting just sort of a big overall feeling of how I put this bird together. But I won't be doing as much about kind of drawing the individual feathers in there. In another workshop, though, we will do exactly what you're talking about. Okay? But but just know we will hit that, just not yet. This is a detail. If you've taken my bird drawing classes before, I always told people to draw the eye ring, the ear patch, and the malar. Does that sound familiar? There are these three kind of parts of the bird's head that I found really kind of help give it kind of a look and character. I'm now finding that there's another part of the bird head that is really useful, and that's called the lores. That's the area of feathers between the beak and the eye here. Sometimes there's a little bit kind of a darker area in here, and it gives the bird a little bit of this angry bird's expression.
Yeah.
Right? It kind of like looks a little bit more stern and serious. And this bird, the warbler, the pretty little warblers, it's this incredibly fierce predator, right? And it's got the blood of velociraptor sloshing through its veins, and it knows that. It's pretty proud of that. So you'll see them. They can have a little bit of attitude. So if your bird looks a little bit too like, oh golly, right? Then you give it some of those lures, and the bird starts to look a little bit more like. Watching you. So here it's like golly, right? And then it's like it gives it just a little bit more. There's also a little pad of feathers that goes over the bird's ear. Sometimes the bird's head patterns go around that. We'll talk a lot more about all these little zones in a subsequent class. When you get to the feet, here's my big thought on feet. On feet, they are going to get, again, some special time just devoted to them. For now, my big suggestion with feet is don't overwork the feet. Very often people are a little bit intimidated by feet, and so they get scared because there's all these scales and nails and all this other sort of stuff on them, and so they slow down and they press really hard and they erase it 20 times and make a big smudge around there. So, and the rest of their bird is loosely, lightly handled, and then the feet, the part they're having the most trouble with, is overworked. And so when people look at your drawing, what do they look at? The feet, right? And you're defeated. So, so my suggestion is, at the start, just keep those feet kind of lightly, loosely handled. Sometimes you can just sort of, show that you kind of go down to a ball with a little kind of nail hooking out of it or something like that. And if the rest of the bird is loosely handled, that works very well for bird feet. So don't, if the whole drawing is super detailed, you can add super detail on your feet as well, but just sort of keep it in the spirit of the rest of your illustration. And one last thing about feet. The bone that goes through this back toe there's one bone like that. That means this back toe cannot wrap around the branch. It can flex from here, and its nail can bend from there, but it can't do this around a branch. So if here's my foot coming down, right, there's a foot coming over there. You'll see a lot of people draw that back toe wrapping around there. That's a bird with a broken toe. No more. All right?
So it's just going straight but has a claw in the end.
Straight, but there's a claw at the end. So it's straight. You can bend from here. Then there's a straight part. There's a little kind of goopy pad with a claw on it. And that claw can bend. And it can bend from here. Those are the points from where it can bend, but you won't see it wrapping like that. So no more wrappy toes on the back.
I have a question.
Yes?
Do you use the same technique when you're looking straight on at a bird? Because these are all kind of profiles.
So let's that we're going to save that for the very end.
Okay.
But that's a very good question. So let's come to that. So you'll notice several things. One, these are all profiles, and all the birds are looking left. Right? That's because we're in the northern hemisphere.
Seriously?
And no, but actually it is initially easier to start drawing all your birds the same direction. But eventually, unless you want to end up with like Zoolander, who could only like turn in one direction, you want to be able to, you want to draw birds in both directions. But I do find that when you're just starting, kind of just getting down the system, it's easier to have your birds pointing one direction. But eventually, you're going to have to get ambidextrous with your birds and get them going both directions. In other classes, we will do things a lot with, all sorts of other different views. We'll tweak that a little bit at the end of this workshop. The last thing I'm going to do is put in some values, some darks and lights on this bird. And for thinking about darks and lights, keep it really simple. So for something like this, I might think of this birdie. There is the pale part, there's the gray part, there is the darkest dark part. If you get too many shades of gray in kind of working out the values of something, your brain can't handle it. So keep it really simple. One way of doing this that I find very useful is to start just by initially putting in the shadows on your bird. Just round it out with some shadows. The light's hitting the back, there'll be shadows on the belly. So put some shadows in there, a little shadows underneath here where that wing comes over. And then, let's put in this middle value. And notice as I put in that middle value, I'm leaving a little bit of white right along the edge. That's sunlight hitting the back. So shadow here, sunlight back there. Then punch in your darkest darks. And you're good to go. So rather simple steps here. You're thinking your lightest lights with a shadow, your middle tones, and your darkest darks. My brain can handle that many shades of gray. All right? And you try to, put in 50 shades of gray, it is not going to be good. All right? Let's just look at putting values in one more bird here. It'll be the same thing. Here are my lightest values, my shadows on the belly there. There is those middle values, and then there are darkest values. So I often go, whether I'm doing graphite or watercolor, I will work from lighter values into darker values, and also from areas of more general color to detail. If I put the detail in first, then as I'm putting in that background gray, I'm going to blur it all. And if you work on toned paper, you can also then add a little bit of white. So I've been working a lot of stuff on gray paper these days and really enjoying that, where you can kind of come along with a white pencil at the end and kind of go bing. That's fun. So just in review, how do we start? Angle along the back. Pop in a head. Dropping a throat down from the front of that circle after I put in my beak line, drop my throat down so that I don't have that head hanging out. Put in my body oval, check its size, and then those last details you can put in any real order. And that gives me the framework for my bird. So there's my bird. But what if I want to make my bird just a little bit better? What is the little trick that you can do that all the high school seniors know makes for a better photograph? Then, so if, it's useful to have, for court documents, the profile and this, right? But you don't see people really doing that in their senior photos, right? That's not very exciting, that's not very exciting. What are they always doing? They're doing 3/4 view, kind of looking at you a little bit, right? That looks cool. And if your bird is actually just looking out at you a little bit, and birds like to do that, they'll totally be checking you out all the time. If you just turn the head a little bit towards you, it looks so cool. And it's not that hard to do. All right, so we're gonna take our bird and turn it towards you just a little bit, and you'll see you're gonna like your birds even better. So here's side view. Here's a 3/4 view. All right, so this bird is looking, here you're actually seeing 3/4 view of the chest and the head. You also can sometimes have side view of the chest and it's just turning its head towards you. All right? So how do you handle drawing something like this? And initially you're thinking, oh wow, this is way beyond my pay grade. Right? But wait. Check this out. This is something you can totally do. Because it's going to start, those initial lines are going to be exactly what we had before. Right? Here's the line for the back. Here's the line for, there's the circle for the head. There's the eye beak line, the front, and that. So I'm starting this bird in the 3/4 view position exactly the same way. So now comes the center line. So the center line is, you think of the bird's zipper line. If this bird kind of goes to zip up its bird suit, right? Where's the zipper on its bird suit? Right up the middle of this bird. That's its center line. And the center line is going to be very useful in drawing this. Here I've put it in as a dashed line, but I don't drag dash it when I draw this lightly in my journal. But I've just dashed it here to make it a little bit easier for us to see. But I'll physically draw in that line, lightly on my piece of paper. Here's my wings, tail, legs. For the wings, remember how I said that that wing could be anywhere in here? In a 3/4 view position, it's going to be closer towards the back. So it's going to be closer here. Because in the side view here, you're seeing, here's my wing. As I turn the bird this way, that is going closer towards the back. So wing closer to the back. And here's another set of lines that is, if you're going to be drawing the whole body, is especially helpful. And what they are called parallel guides. The idea of parallel guides is parts of the body that are lined up in a 3/4 position. I still want those to line up, but it can be a little bit confusing. So for instance, if you're drawing a head of somebody, here's this person's head. All right? And here's their nose. I want that to line up. I'm getting these to be parallel with there. If here's his nose, all right, and my eye line, I do like that, it's going to look very Picasso. So, especially in these 3/4 view pictures, that can get a little bit confusing. So having parallel guides is going to really help me out. So where do I put my parallel guides? Anywhere that something is going to come across the center line. Bless you. All right. So look at this. Here is the bottom of the throat. Here's the bottom of that part of the orange. Here's the bottom of the beak. Here is the bottom of its chest feathers. Here's the bottom of its tail. Boom, 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 boom. Those lines are all lined up parallel across my bird. And you'll see in a moment, as I start to draw in my bird, how that helps. So let's draw in some of this bird. The first thing I'm going to do is draw my beak. The beak is going to start at the intersection of the eye-beak line and the center line. So if it's a long skinny beak, it's going to be starting in there and coming out like that from that point in there. So let's draw that over here. The other thing that's going to be really cool here, and this is a big deal, is that the far side of the head is going to wrap around the other side of the beak here. So you see that little bit of feathers on the other side of that beak? That makes this look like it's turning towards you a little bit. You're seeing a little bit of the feathers on the other side of that beak. So instead of having the beak come down like that, that feels like the side of the head. We are coming down there. Right? So the side feathers come around the side of the head. That will, just that little tweak starts to turn it towards you. This side of the head is flatter. This side of the head is rounder. Here are body feather, oops, there's my eye. Still on that eye beak line. On the body feathers, a good part with this is that birds do not have an even coat of feathers all the way over their chest. They have a zone of small feathers across here, and down here on the sides there's a strip of feathers and a strip of feathers with a bald spot in the middle. And then the bird just does a comb over. Right? And as it does, those two sides come together, making a little seam that you'll see on the lower breast, not going all the way up into the little feathers, but where these two groups of feathers come together, you'll often see that little seam there. And that helps people also be able to visualize, here's the center line coming up there. Keeping the wings simple. Notice that my base of my tail is parallel with the base of my wings, is parallel with the base of my body. See how that keeps the bird symmetrical? That's why those parallel guides are so useful. We'll deal with sort of details of feathers on another day. But if we want to put patterns in on this, so first of all, you can have the bird in a total side view and just take the head and tilt it towards you a little bit. Just a little tweak. Just move that line out on the other side of the beak and you just moved your head a little bit. That's all you have to do. Right? But if you want to also turn the chest towards you, there's a couple of things. Oh, let's put some feet in. Generally with legs and feet and branches, draw your bird first. Then draw your feet in, and then draw a branch to meet where your feet are. If you draw the branch first, you sometimes have to draw legs that are really unusually long or too short or in an awkward position. So I will often draw my bird first, then give it legs, and then give it a branch to sit on. That's a good trick. Now, if your bird has, say, a hood like a junco, a dark line going all the way across, we know that it's symmetrical on either side. But when you look at your bird, it is not going to look symmetrical. Look at this. This line here on this side of the center line, compare that with this. What's happening is here, it is hooking up more steeply around the side of that bird. So anything that's going across the bird and kind of wrapping up, you're going to see that pattern compressed into a shorter space because you're looking around the side of the bird. So expect patterns to kind of hook up if they're pointing up, or if, like, say, a black phoebe, it's got something that's pointed down, those are going to hook down. Compare this side here with this shape here. All right, see how different those are? On the other side, on the side that's going away from you, it's going to hook either up or down as you're going around there. So expect to see that pattern compressed into a shorter space. Let's take a look at it, how it looks on our rose-breasted grosbeak here. So I've got this part here hooking up. I have, here's this going right down the center line. A little bit of a hook up right there. And when you expect to see those things, you look at a bird, you can. Compare, look at this, see that line on the lower breast there? That's the seam where it does the comb over. And that shows us right where, right? Look at this hook up here. Compare that with that. Another thing that's very useful is, take a look right here on the forehead of this bird, where the beak comes over. Here's this beak sticking out. Very often you'll see a little line just going right up the center line. Even if the bird has a head of one solid color, you'll sometimes see a little groove in the feathers right in there. That helps you kind of keep track of that center line. The wing is starting closer to the back. And you've got 3/4 view body. This guy's here just to help us think about how useful parallel guides are. We're trying to draw the patterns on this bird. Right? It's really nice to be able to keep that bird symmetrical. And this birdie, here's a side view of the body, and look what it's doing with its head. Isn't this cool? It's just turning its head towards you a little bit. And what you're seeing is beak is coming out of this area, and the head, and so here's the middle line of the head. The head is wrapping around the other side there. So let me see that. So there is my beak coming out. My head line is wrapping around the other side of where my beak is attaching into my head. So that little thing there, that just kind of getting that beak to start in here, takes that bird's head and turns it towards you just a little bit. And that takes any bird drawing and turns it into the senior portrait. And then they start to have more of an interaction with you. You're sort of looking at them and they're kind of just looking back at you a little bit. What's up with you? This is not the only way to draw birds. This is not the right way to draw birds. This is a strategy that I've come up with that really helps me get those forms on paper. My suggestion is you go home and you just crank through a whole bunch of practice birds. You may find that for you, you're going to modify it a little bit differently. Some people, for instance, have been telling me that they like drawing in the chest before they put in that little eye beak line. Totally up to you. See what works for you. As Bruce Lee said, just absorb what's useful. Find what's working for you out there and do that. But here's the secret. You can do this if you do this, right? And so, si se puede, pero hazlo. You have to do it. You have to do it. So, give yourself a goal of, in the next week, just crank through, just drop down for an hour, on one of those sites and crank through a whole mess of bird quick sketches. You can absolutely do this. Then the next time you sit down to draw a bird, what's going to happen is this will be on autopilot in your head. So you can do it if you do it. Thank you very much. I hope that this was a useful workshop for all of you in how to get the bird. Thank you.